Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, and once more we're diving into that massive Bethesda leak. Now typically once we cover a story, I really don't go back to the well of the same pool of information unless there have been a lot of updates, but there were some things in my original coverage of this leaked Bethesda games list that I didn't really have an idea of what they may be, probably because all of my hype and attention was focused on, Fallout 3 Remaster, Oblivion Remaster, and Dishonored 3. Now that I'm kind of out of the hype phase and I'm like, all right, when are things going to start happening? And I start to get my head into that gear. I look at this list once more, and there are actually a few updates that we can provide on it. We're going to identify some projects on here that previously many were unable to say what they were, such as Project Kestrel, or what this licensed IP game on the list was. Not only that, but there have been updates on the Xbox side of things, both internally, I put that in quotes for a reason, and externally, which made me want to talk about it once more because obviously Bethesda is pretty important to this channel and their upcoming games list looks incredible. So we'll dive into all of that, both what's going to be happening or at least the games that we think are still happening. We'll talk about it. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope all of you are doing well. And with that, be sure to consider subscribing if you're into all that Bethesda goodness. Let's begin with the response from Phil Spencer to sort of set the table here. So externally, over on Twitter, here's what Phil had to say. We've seen the conversation around old emails and documents. It is hard to see our team's work shared in this way because so much has changed and there's so much to be excited about right now and in the future. We will share the real plans when we are ready. So, saving face a little bit here, like, guys, it's not really the real plans. We're not going all digital as we launch Starfield with half the game on the disc. No, that's not happening. Or obviously things like games on that list that we saw may not be happening anymore and may have just been planned. We'll break down which games those may be because I hate to say it, but it may be one that I really care about. But I want to read the internal memo, discuss a little further, and then get really into the thick of the range of topics I had planned for this video. So the internal memo from Phil Spencer, which leaked, surprise, surprise, is coming from The Verge, and here's what Phil had to say. Team. Today, several documents submitted in the court proceedings related to our proposed acquisition of Activision Blizzard were unintentionally disclosed. I know this is disappointing, even if many of the documents are well over a year old and our plans have evolved. So right there, you're going to start to see a little bit of a spiel here from Phil, which is, we know this is going to leak, so let's kind of almost make this a press release in a sense, especially this last paragraph. It's kind of funny. I know we all take the confidentiality of our plans and our partners' information very seriously. This leak obviously is not us living up to that expectation. We will learn from what happened and be better going forward. We all put incredible amounts of passion and energy into our work, and this is never how we want that hard work to be shared with our community. That said, there's so much more to be excited about. That sounds familiar. And when we're ready, we'll share the real plans with our players. That also sounds familiar. In closing, I appreciate all of the work that you pour into Team Xbox to surprise and delight, there's another PR term Phil has used before, our players. In the days and weeks ahead, let's stay focused on what we can control, continuing the amazing success of Starfield, the upcoming launch of the incredible and accessible Forza Motorsport, and continuing to build games, services, and devices that millions of players can enjoy. Phil. So maybe morale really was low. Obviously, I know we as consumers are like, yeah, let's go, like Fallout 3 Remaster. But for the people working on it, the people who work in like PR, marketing, planning out, like how are we going to reveal this? How are we going to do this? How are we going to, in the most optimistic way I say this, excite people? Hopefully not trick people, right? But how are we going to excite people? When's the right day? Like with Fallout, you have the bombs drop day coming up soon. You think about that maybe. So I do sympathize with them a bit, but this does read a bit like we know this is going to leak and therefore we're going to put a lot of marketing buzz. Like calling Forza Motorsport the most incredible and accessible one yet. I don't know. That reads to me like something I'd find in Xbox Wire. But that's what Phil had to say. So we cleaned all of that up. And that's important to set the table for what we're going to get into next. So the schedule that we're talking about today is the same one from last week. And what's important to note here with this list is it is from July of 2020, right in the heart of the pandemic. This was where a lot of projects were in flux. A lot of projects were getting significantly delayed. It was almost miraculous seeing games come out in full in this time period. And so naturally, given that you saw Starfield in fiscal year 21, like someone had previously reported, this means that, yeah, a lot of these projects have been delayed, but some also may have been wiped clean off the slate. I hate to say it, but I think one of those games, it's possible, could have been Dishonored 3. I say that just because of the massive success Deathloop is. Look, I've been very open that Deathloop is not my favorite game from Arcane, but I am very much open to a sequel. I think the ideas are there. I think they should have just built off what was there in Dishonored, because clearly that was the goal with Deathloop, but it felt like choice was really vague in this game, and I wanted more of that. Still, Deathloop has surpassed, since becoming a part of Xbox Game Pass and launching as a PlayStation exclusive originally, 5 million players, which is nothing to scoff at. You see, the reason that Arcane walked away from the likes of Dishonored and Prey, which I imagine they would have continued to iterate upon and release over and over in this ideal world, is they weren't selling that well. Now with Xbox and Game Pass in the mix, you can kind of throw a flyer out there on some of these series and see how they do once more with an expanded audience. The sort of try before you buy mentality that's really helping Starfield, for example, as it's just past 10 million players, which is crazy to think about. So with Deathloop, we already know that something's cooking based off a voice actor leak. Take a listen.
Do you remember like the code names they were using for it or anything like that?
Yes, I can't say them because they're still sometimes hiring us under the code names.
Oh, interesting.
Can tell you nothing.
Did I just say something that I shouldn't have said?
When you combine that with the massive success and Arcane not having the sales that they did for these older series that they've given a lot of attention to, it makes sense to me that seeing how well Deathloop did, not only on a sales player level, but honestly critically, those scores really surprising me, by the way. I will never understand why we're giving Deathloop a 10. As great as a game I think it can be for some people, a perfect game? No, thank you. I don't think so. But Deathloop did do extremely well. Probably one of the best performances Arcane has seen across the board. It makes sense that it would earn itself a sequel. Now, does that mean that because Deathloop 2 exists, that Dishonored 3 can't coexist? No, but when you know now that Deathloop is in the Dishonored universe, it's pretty much the spiritual successor to Dishonored. You're kind of overlapping with both projects. You have this supernatural assassin approach. I don't know if these two can really coexist in the same space. Now, as someone who loves Dishonored, it's one of my favorite gaming series. Yeah, please give me that third one. But as I settled down for my hype and thought about it more and really looked at the facts, I think this is one you can maybe scratch off the list. But I also want to identify some stuff on the list too. As you'll go back here and you'll see there's Project Kestrel and there is a licensed IP game. These were two standouts to me that I went, not too sure about these ones. However, one thing that's important to point out here to start identifying Project Kestrel is let's take a look at Elder Scrolls Online on this list, where you see Elder Scrolls Online Greymoor, and then each subsequent year it says Elder Scrolls Online Expansion. Now, any other game gets DLC, right? Doom Eternal, DLC. Starfield, DLC. Doom Year Zero, DLC. But only the ZeniMax Online Studios games gets Expansion as the label, with the project name before it. Now, I'm starting to think that Project Kestrel is the new IP that ZeniMax Online Studios has been working on for a long while now. Let's get some more information on that for those who haven't watched some of my older videos, because I have covered this stuff before, but I think it's important now that we can kind of identify it and know that the window is pretty close. For starters, based off job listings here that were posted over on Reddit, ZeniMax Online's new IP could be an open-world, multi-plat action RPG, which kind of fits the bill because when you go to their website here, they say we've learned a lot bringing the world of Elder Scrolls to life. And when you think of how massive Elder Scrolls Online is, I still think one of the most overlooked MMOs on the market. Like, I know it's not perfect, but I think it's dang good. And especially when you look at where it started and where it is now, the way it's evolved is fantastic. I just think with, Final Fantasy 14 and obviously the nostalgia for WoW, I think Elder Scrolls Online gets way too overlooked for its improvements. But as you'll see here, they're going to take a lot of the lessons learned from Elder Scrolls and pack them into this new IP, where they say it's time to take those lessons and build a new AAA IP. The vision for our next game is grand in every sense of the word. So again, alluding to that grand open world multi-plat action RPG. And that's why we're developing a new engine to support the needs of the project in the studio. And because we're in early pre-production, it's the perfect time to join us and make your mark on an incredible new project. Typically, MMOs are in development much longer than your standard game, although things have kind of changed because of the world of live service games. We see titles launching incomplete, kind of with the fix it later mindset. I would say that Elder Scrolls Online originally just launched in a boring state, but it wasn't really feeling incomplete. You had a lot of starting points, a lot of content was there, but stuff like the subscription service really hurt it. But we've seen as live services develop, we've gotten more and more skeletons of games with the meat added on later. Pre-production was noted here, but this is kind of dated because then you go to this little snippet here from Windows Central Gaming and you'll see the that they write, according to an interview with Ben Jones, creative director of the game, being the new IP at ZeniMax Online Studios, this new IP has been in development for 4.5 years, and Jones notes that he leads the design team of 50 people, and that the game is now being worked on by a team of almost 200 developers in total. 4.5 years, given MMOs and how they're handled, I feel like we're going to get a CGI trailer when this one drops. I would love to see gameplay off the rip, but just when you look at every single expansion trailer ESO has done, it's always been CGI. That's just the MMO way of doing things, right? Create the idea in your head and then deliver something that looks nothing close to it. But anyway, I digress. 4.5 years. I've had this one, if you remember, with my predictions video earlier this year for the Xbox Summer Showcase. I had this one picked out as a reveal this year. I think it's imminent, whether it be at a developer direct, maybe at the top of the year, or next Summer Showcase, whatever it may be. It's soon, and this is probably Project Kestrel because it's the only one on the list that has a follow-up expansion the next year and that follows the same cadence that Elder Scrolls Online does. So that's what I think is going on with Project Kestrel and what it is. So you can start to imagine in your head some things like, for example, that it could be a Mandalorian MMO. That was one rumor that popped out from both Scholesy and Nick Baker, Nick being someone we're going to talk about later with this next set of rumors here. But yeah, this is one that we don't really have much of an idea. But given that it's a new IP, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably not Mandalorian. Now we turn our attention back to this list once more, where we see that there is a licensed IP game. And it's interesting because if you look in the 2022 area, they had no problem labeling Indiana Jones game well before its announcement. This is, again, July 2020. So what is this licensed IP game? Well, let's go to LinkedIn, where we have Brad Fawaz, who is leading the game design at Roundhouse Studios. And here you can tell that the game has been in development for just nearing 4 years now, and that it's coming soon. Again, given the standard development cycle for AAA games nowadays, I think this is a reveal that's imminent. This was also on my prediction list as one to appear at the Summer Showcase. I was wrong, clearly. Wrong twice. Whew, that doesn't happen often. Anyway, continuing on, we see here that there are some other LinkedIn postings for Human Head Studios. Now, for those who don't know Human Head, that was originally the name that Roundhouse went by before they joined the Bethesda family. And actually, you may even recall Human Head was working on the original Prey 2. May that game rest in peace. What a fantastic looking game that we got robbed of. But Human Head eventually molded into Bethesda Game Studios and went under a new moniker in Roundhouse. This is all important because you'll see here in this senior programming position, it says worked on a small team in Unreal Engine 4 to build an unannounced, online, team-based PvPvE third-person shooter based on a major comic license. Assumed lead programmer role and continued developing project through alpha. Worked on gameplay systems from player movement, weapons, status effects, game modes, and many other areas, including networking, optimization, and all AI for a variety of creatures in the world. Now, I mentioned Nick Baker earlier. The word from him over on Xbox Era is that this game falls under the Disney banner. So with that in mind, if we're to take Nick's word at face value, then you think about the Disney banner, a major comic book license. What could it be? Probably Marvel. And this is where I think Xbox lucks out a little bit because they really needed this type of partnership with Lucasfilms. They needed this partnership with Disney. I know a lot of Xbox fans who are really like deep in the trenches are saying, no, we don't need to do what PlayStation does. Phil has said as much. I'm sorry, I get all of that, but like if I'm leading a business and you're leaving the likes of Star Wars, Marvel, DC on the table, when done well, you look at the success of Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which weathered a horrible storm at launch and has still found tremendous success. These IP are untouchable, and you definitely want them in your library like PlayStation's done with Wolverine, with Spider-Man. It drives the business forward. So I'm looking at this from the business side of things. As a consumer, we want it for everybody, right? That'd always be great. I always say, though, that exclusives drive console sales, exclusives drive console value. And so I think Xbox does have something here. And so I think Xbox is going to probably take the extra time to nurture this one if it is a Marvel game, especially given that PvPvE, maybe live servicey. We've seen how that's gone with Suicide Squad, Avengers. The Marvel WoW sizzle phase, if it is Marvel, has come and gone. The latest phase into the MCU has phased out, if you will, for many people, myself included. I love comic books. I love Marvel, but I just, the quality's not there. The vision doesn't feel like it's there. And so it's not the easy win that I think people perceive it to be. So maybe it took some extra time, but this is a quick identification of what may also be on this list. And I thought it was useful information because I did pass it on Defining Duke, but I don't always assume that the listener base there is the same as what we have here. So I wanted to make sure I followed up here and made sure I provided the updates and let you all speak your mind on what we have here. So let me know what you think about Project Kestrel, this licensed game, and so on and so forth. I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts. And with that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.